There's a corner of the internet that's been growing fast over the past couple of years, and if you spend any time in fitness or men's health spaces online, you've probably run into it. Videos with titles like, "How I Doubled My Testosterone in 90 Days," or "The Truth About Low T That Doctors Won't Tell You." Hashtags racking up hundreds of millions of views. Teenage boys and men in their 20s convinced that their hormones are failing them, and that the solution is either a stack of supplements or a clinic that'll write them a prescription for testosterone replacement therapy with minimal questions asked. This is T-maxing. And the reason it's worth talking about seriously, not to dismiss it, not to mock it, but actually seriously, is that buried underneath all the hype and the misinformation and the marketing, there's a real question that real men are trying to answer. The question just isn't being answered honestly by most of the people who've built an audience around it. So let's actually answer it. The term comes from the same online vocabulary as looks-maxing, the idea of pushing something to its absolute ceiling. T-maxing means maximizing testosterone, and the trend splits pretty cleanly into two camps. The first camp is the natural side. Diet, training, sleep, sunlight, cold exposure, specific supplements. The second camp is the pharmaceutical side. Testosterone replacement therapy, or TRT, often obtained through private clinics that have made it extraordinarily easy to get a prescription if you're willing to pay for one. Both camps have a serious problem, and the problems are different. Let's start with the natural side, because this is where most of the content lives and where most of the confusion is generated. The claim that you can dramatically raise your testosterone through lifestyle changes alone is, and this is important, partly true and mostly exaggerated. Yes, resistance training raises testosterone. Yes, sleep deprivation tanks it. Yes, being significantly overweight suppresses it. Yes, chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, and cortisol actively competes with testosterone production. All of that is real. If a man is sleeping badly, barely moving, carrying excess body fat, and living in a state of constant low-grade stress, his testosterone is almost certainly below where it could be, and improving those things will genuinely move his levels in the right direction. But here's the part that never makes it into the viral content. The lifestyle interventions that have actual scientific backing, training, sleep, body composition, stress management, are going to get you to your biological ceiling. That ceiling is set by your genetics, your age, and the particular hormonal environment you inherited. It is not going to transform someone with mid-range testosterone into someone with the hormones of a competitive athlete. The gains from optimizing lifestyle are real, but they are bounded. When influencers tell you that someone went from a testosterone level of 400 to 900 through supplements and cold showers, they're either lying, they had serious correctable deficiencies driving that initial low number, or they're on something they're not disclosing. Usually the third option.
The supplement side of T-maxing deserves its own honest breakdown. There are a handful of compounds that have legitimate research behind them in specific contexts. Vitamin D, if you're deficient, has a real relationship with testosterone. Correcting a deficiency can produce measurable improvement. Zinc operates similarly. If you're genuinely low in zinc, which some men are, especially if they sweat heavily through training, supplementing can help. Ashwagandha has accumulated a reasonable body of evidence suggesting modest reductions in cortisol and modest improvements in testosterone, particularly in men under chronic stress. Modest. That word is doing a lot of work. These are not transformative interventions. They're corrections, ways of stopping things from pulling your levels down, not ways of pushing them up beyond your natural range. The supplements that dominate the T-maxing content landscape, the aggressively marketed testosterone boosters, with long ingredient lists and even longer claims, mostly don't have meaningful evidence behind them at the doses included. Some of them are harmless. Some contain compounds at doses high enough to potentially cause problems. Almost none of them will do what the packaging implies. The testosterone supplement market has been extraordinarily good at monetizing male insecurity, and T-maxing content is functionally an extended advertisement for that market, whether or not the creators are aware of it.
Now for the pharmaceutical side, which is where the real risks live. TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, is a legitimate medical treatment. For men who have been clinically diagnosed with hypogonadism, meaning their testes genuinely do not produce adequate testosterone, TRT can be genuinely life-changing. It improves energy, mood, body composition, sexual function, and long-term metabolic health. The medical case for it, when it's appropriately prescribed, is solid. The problem is that a growing ecosystem of private clinics has made TRT accessible to essentially anyone willing to pay for it, regardless of whether they actually need it. Get a blood test, show a number that's anywhere in the lower half of the normal range, describe some symptoms that frankly apply to any tired, stressed, sleep-deprived man alive, and there are clinics that will start you on a protocol the same week. The financial incentives here are not subtle. TRT is a recurring prescription. Once a patient starts, they tend to stay on it. That's a reliable revenue stream, and some of these clinics are structured around maximizing it, rather than around providing the kind of thorough evaluation that a decision this significant actually warrants. Here's what most of the T-maxing content doesn't tell you about going on TRT when you don't have a genuine clinical need for it. When you introduce exogenous testosterone, meaning testosterone that comes from outside your body, your hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis detects that testosterone is present and does exactly what it's designed to do. It shuts down your own production. The system that signals your testes to produce testosterone goes quiet because the feedback loop says there's already enough. Your natural production suppresses, sometimes dramatically, and the longer you stay on TRT, the more that internal machinery atrophies. For many men, coming off TRT after a sustained period means dealing with a testosterone level significantly lower than what they started with, while their body's ability to self-regulate slowly tries to recover. That process can take months, sometimes longer. For young men, the stakes are higher. Adolescents and men in their early 20s, whose hormonal systems are still developing, face a version of this risk that's less studied and potentially more serious. Fertility is a real concern. Exogenous testosterone suppresses sperm production, sometimes reversibly, sometimes not. The research on long-term TRT use in young, healthy men is genuinely thin, not because doctors are hiding something, but because it's relatively new territory, and the full downstream effects won't be visible for years.
None of this means the underlying frustration driving T-maxing is illegitimate. The previous video on this channel covered the real, documented, generational decline in male testosterone levels, driven by chemical exposure, sleep deprivation, sedentary lives, ultra-processed food, chronic stress. That decline is real. Men who feel like something is off hormonally aren't imagining it. The problem is that the T-maxing industry has taken a genuine issue and built a commercial machine around it that frequently makes things worse, while charging men for the privilege. The men who are actually optimizing their testosterone, not performing optimization for an audience, not buying into a supplement stack with 40 ingredients, just actually doing the things that move the needle, are boring to watch online. They're sleeping 8 hours. They're training with heavy compound movements 3 or 4 times a week. They're not overweight. They're managing their stress with something approximating competence. They're not microwaving food in plastic containers. They get outside. They don't have a cortisol spike every time they open their phone at midnight. Nothing about that is new or exciting or marketable. But the research on testosterone is pretty consistent. The biggest gains available to most men don't come from a clinic or a supplement. They come from not doing the things that are actively suppressing the hormone they already have. If you're genuinely concerned about your testosterone, not because a YouTube video made you feel like you should be, but because you're experiencing real symptoms, real fatigue, real changes in body composition or mood or recovery that you can't explain, the right move is a proper blood panel with a doctor who is going to look at both total and free testosterone, who's going to rule out other causes before jumping to a hormonal conclusion, and who has no financial incentive to put you on a prescription. That doctor exists. They're just less visible than the clinics running ads on social media.
The goal here isn't to be the guy who says the whole conversation is overblown and men should just stop worrying about it. It isn't. The goal is to separate what's real from what's a business model dressed up as health advice. Because they can look identical from the outside, and telling them apart matters a lot when what's at stake is your endocrine system. Know what the evidence actually says. Do the things it points toward. Be skeptical of anything that's trying to sell you urgency alongside a product. That combination, urgency plus product, is the signature of a space where your insecurity is the inventory.